you have a book coming out too, don't you?
I do. In February.
February.
Unleashing the Power of Respect, the I Am Approach. And it will hopefully introduce people a little bit more to the I Am. It's a collection of stories of people that I've worked with, my patient teachers, and then change the perspective on the I Am. Because, we pathologize people, we stigmatize people, we say that they are broken. And the I Am is saying no one is broken. And that is such an important thing, especially for what we're going to be talking about tonight, because the biological domain is real, but you change the environment of those cells, you change the response. And sometimes that response will not lead you down that path of success of the I Am. Tom, can you please introduce our guest for tonight?
Absolutely. As a speaker, she has presented for the second annual Teaching Cannabis Awareness and Prevention virtual conference in 2021, Alcoholics and Substance Providers of New York State, Community Coalitions of Virginia, the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Solano County, and many other organizations. She is also a former actress with appearances on The West Wing, Disney's Bolt, and famously was the voice of Jill Valentine in the Resident Evil franchise.
Woo.
She is the co-author of the only fictional story which illustrates cannabis-induced psychosis, A Night in Jail. Welcome to the Dr. Joe Show, Heidi Anderson-Swan.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, Heidi. It's so
Welcome,
great to
Heidi.
have you here.
Thank you very much.
Wow.
I have to make a correction in the introduction, though. I know IMDb says that I was with Bolt. I never had anything to do with Bolt.
Oh.
So they screwed up the Bolt
Yeah.
reference?
Yeah, and I
Nice.
think actually people have been like, "Oh, wow, they're very impressed with me," and because that of that mistake, and it's a mistake, and so anyway,
We're still pretty impressed, though.
Thank
It's
you.
pretty impressive CV there. So tell us about your book, A Night in Jail. Where'd this come from?
Well, my brother. All right, I'll start back in the late 1970s, early 80s. Marijuana was very commonly used by people of all ages where we grew up. My brother and I grew up in Washington State, and I was 12 when I started drinking alcohol and smoking pot, and nobody told us that there was anything wrong with doing it. It was just there, and we just did it. And so one time, and I didn't do either one a whole lot, by the way. I was a very ambitious kid. I was a very social kid. I had, a lot going on in my life, but that's just how normal it was, that someone who was like involved in student government, and I was a cheerleader and I got good grades, that someone like that would still be drinking alcohol and smoking pot, because everybody was just sort of doing it. And so one time I was getting high with my best friend, and all of a sudden I didn't know who she was, and I didn't know where I was. And then I'd remember, and then I'd forget. Now, mind you, we were in my house, the laundry room of my house. And here I was going in and out of reality, and it scared me so much. And this was back when the potency of marijuana was about 5%. So very, very, very low, especially by today's standards. And I didn't think much of it. Now, my friend was fine, but I was not. So it wasn't like it was laced with something else and we were both having this horrible experience. No, this was unique to me, and she was fine. And I just didn't think much of it, but I really stayed away from it because it just was not a good experience for me. So
How old were you when that was happening?
Like 15, 16, maybe even 17. I can't remember the exact. I just remember being in the laundry room and with my high school best friend.
Right.
And
Okay.
so I didn't like this experience. And it wasn't until just about 10 years ago that I found out there's a name for that. It's called cannabis-induced psychosis. And that's where a person loses touch with reality because of their use of marijuana. And I'm the perfect example of it, because it never happened to me before that. It never happened to me again. It only happened that one time. And it was very scary. And like I said, it didn't happen to my friend. And what we found out is that 10 to 15% of the population is predisposed to psychosis. Most of us don't know it. And marijuana is an environmental risk factor to pull the trigger for it. And so even in small doses, someone who is predisposed can have a very negative experience, like what I just had, or like what I just described. So my brother, he really liked the funhouse feeling that it gave him. He liked, the losing touch with reality. And so he did it just a little bit every day through high school, through college, and graduate school. And then after he completed graduate school, he went on and he was like, oh, you know what? I did really well with marijuana all these years. I'll go ahead and try some cocaine. And so then he moved on to cocaine. And then after that, it was crack. And he fell in love with crack. And then right after that, not long, he was homeless and living under a bridge in Seattle, Washington. And he went to jail 18 times. Horrible, horrible for our family. How it's horrible to think of someone you love living outside in the rain, literally in Seattle under a bridge. I mean, it was devastating for our family. And I can't imagine, or no, now I can imagine what it was like for him. To be him, to live like that. It was awful. So
let me stop you for a moment though.
Yeah.
What about for your family? What about your
Yeah.
your parents? What was it like for them?
It was terrible. I mean, first of all, everybody's baffled. It's like, what? What's he? What he's doing? What? And doing drugs all the time. This is the golden boy. He was super ambitious, really happy, handsome, lots of friends, always cared about his grades, always talking about what he wanted to do with his future. He had our parents were good parents to us. We had a loving home, a wonderful home, and we both got very good education. So, I mean, we were like, what is happening? And then the heartbreak, and they tried, we all tried to dissuade him from the life that he had chosen. And we ended up giving him an intervention. And, that was really difficult. We were crying for 5 hours with him, reading letters to him, begging, pleading, please give up drugs, please come back to the family, please come back to your life. And and this is someone, I mean, this was before everybody had cell phones. So it's amazing to me that we were able to get him, this person who was living with homelessness, out from the street and into a room with us. I mean, it's still really astounding. I mean, and he was of the streets. He was, I mean, like what you see outside with the long, dirty hair and the long nails, and his teeth had started to fall out, and the clothes were filthy, and he smelled really bad, and it was just, I mean, it's just hard. It is so painful for all of us, my parents, everyone. It was extremely difficult. But so after 5 hours, he said no. He said no, and he walked out into the rain. And so it was, I mean, we were just devastated by this. You see these intervention shows and you go, oh, that's great. It's or you see the film Beautiful Boy, you go, oh, the happy ending. And there's not always happy endings, and we have to be honest with people about this. And so after many agonizing years, and if any of you care to read the story about this section, which we don't have time to go into now, it's on the website anightinjail.com under about the authors. And so
we will definitely take a look at that, because it is so true that the interventions do not always work.
No.
But sometimes they do. And one of the interventions that I am going to do right now is intervene so our sponsors can intervene with you.
Okay.
So we will be right back with the Dr. Joe Show. Larry, let's take a commercial break and then we'll hold on to that music so Mark can give us the introduction again. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show.
And we are back with the Dr. Joe Show with author Heidi Swan talking about a night in jail. Fascinating stuff.
And about her brother and the homelessness and what this is like for him and for the family. So he was homeless on the streets for 10 years?
Or in jail.
Or in jail.
In jail, yeah. And so the deal breaker was he had been arrested so many times that if he did one more time, if he got busted one more time, he was going to go to prison. And for him, no. No, he's like, jail is fine. You can get through jail, but I can't go to prison ever. No. And so that stick really helped him with sobriety. And so he said, okay, I will go into treatment instead of going to prison. How about that?
You know, I'm not sure people understand the difference between jail and prison. Can you help us with that?
Well, he would say jail is just juvenile boot camp. That's what he says. You're checked in, you're checked out. Now, prison is, and I don't know that I'm the best person to ask about this. Just that he didn't want to go there. He said you get a parole officer, and they drug test you all the time. Once you get out, and it's just locked away. It's just a much more intense experience. And then he said, and if I, because we write about this in the book, he said I would have to check in with them, and once I got out of jail, I couldn't live on the streets without using drugs or alcohol. So I will get drug tested and I'll get sent back to prison, and it'll just be an endless cycle. I think that's why he said he couldn't deal with prison. But so after the intervention that we gave him, there was a few years that went by, and I'm just going to cut to the chase. The good news is that we were able to get him off the streets and get him evaluated by a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist said, he said, after the visit with the psychiatrist, he said, I told her things I've never told anyone. And I said, oh, well, what did you tell her? And he said that I'd been hearing voices. And what?
Very interesting.
Yeah, and that he thought he was John the Baptist, and that he thought that the CIA was following him, and that he thought the only safe place that he could be where cameras weren't following him was underneath the freeway. What? What? I mean, I was like, I had no idea. I don't think any of us in our family had any idea. We thought he was a drug addict. And we thought he was dealing drugs to feed his habit, and he was throwing his life away for that reason entirely. So I was really surprised. And so our mother took him in, and she let him live with her, and she fed him and helped him to, get back on his feet. And he started going to 12-step meetings, and he was being treated and getting sober. I mean, the whole thing. And it was at that time that I first started to find articles that said teen marijuana use increases the risk for adult schizophrenia.
Absolutely. That's right.
I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was like, why doesn't everybody know this?
Right. So
why isn't it common knowledge?
Right. People need to know that, because listen, if you use once, your increase in risk goes from 1 to 1.2. You use more than 50 times, you have almost a 7 times risk of developing schizophrenia. People just don't think about it. No. Weed is safe, right? I mean, it's just weed.
Yeah.
Right? It's just weed is what people will say.
It's legal.
It's legal. That's right.
It's legal.
It's not addictive. Yeah, right. And none of those things are true. That's the big myth, guys.
Yeah.
Weed is absolutely addictive, physiologically, not just psychologically, and it is a gateway. Mm-hmm. And your brother, sadly showed us that. So
Yeah.
what happens next? Then what happens?
So I told him, and one of the things that his story illustrates is that it just like you were talking about the gateway, he said it. He was like, oh, all these years of marijuana went just fine. I'll go ahead and try coke.
Right.
And they mix now, especially today. Polydrug use is the problem. It's not just that they're using marijuana, they're mixing it with Xanax, or they're mixing it with meth or alcohol, the most common. And that is just so dangerous, especially when we're talking about driving. They with cocaine, and it just goes on and on. Anyway, so I told my brother about this. Here's what I wanted to say is that of all the illicit drugs that can cause a psychotic reaction, like what happened to me, the one that converts most often to schizophrenia, as you just described, Dr. Joe, is marijuana. And that's above hallucinogens, above meth, above cocaine, above alcohol's like way down on the list. You've got to abuse alcohol for many, many years before, something like that happens. But marijuana is at the top for mental health problems. And people don't want to believe it, but that's what the studies say. And that's even with low potency marijuana, 2 to 8%, like what I used, like what my brother used. However, the stuff they're selling in the pot shop that you have in your community today is much stronger than that. It's several times stronger than that. The bud itself, like what you get in a joint, is probably, I'm guessing, and I don't know about Massachusetts, but in California, it's around 20%. That's 4 times stronger than what I was using when I lost touch with reality.
That's right.
But it concentrates what people are vaping and dabbing, the shatter, the wax, the oils, those are 10 to 20 times stronger.
Yeah. Some of the concentrates can be 90% greater or 90% or more THC. People need to know that there's THC, which is the psychoactive part, and there's the CBD part, which may actually have some medicinal properties. But if you look at what has happened to weed over the last 20 years or more, it's been hydroponically modified and genetically modified. So the CBD level has been absolutely static and remains low. And the THC, just like you're saying, Heidi, it's astronomical. As I said, this ain't your grandfather's weed.
That's what our Surgeon General said. Yes, our former Surgeon General. Yes. And so I told my brother about these studies. And mind you, I didn't know anything about the high potency products. I'd only heard about these low potency things. And so 10 to 15% of the population is predisposed. And that's a lot. That's a big number. I mean, when you think about how many people, what's the percentage of people who are predisposed to like that, have peanut allergies? It's 3% or less. And everybody knows what has peanuts in it. But 10 to 15% of the population is predisposed to psychosis, and they could have a negative reaction with marijuana. And we're not telling people about it. It's not on the boxes. It's not on the billboards. That's really irresponsible. And so anyway, so I told my brother about the studies, and I said, hey, did you have any idea? And he said, what? If I knew marijuana would do that, I never would have tried it. And I said, neither would I. And I said, do you want to write a book to warn teenagers about what we wish we knew when we were young? And he said, yes. And so I'm so grateful to him for doing this, because he really, really lays his life out. So he's so honest and he's so bare about it. And so we wrote A Night in Jail, and the plot is fiction, because we wanted to give it some intrigue and have people go, oh, what's going on? Oh no, what's going to happen? And but all the stories told are true. They are his stories. And so we just spent a lot of time talking on the phone, and he would tell me stories, and I would take notes, and I'd be like, just trying to imagine, because the stories are, they're horrible and fascinating all at once. And to hear what his point of view was, for instance, that he thought he was John the Baptist, and that's why he was living outside. He thought he was doing God's will. by living outside with the locusts. And so to get into that point of view, to understand what the thoughts are, and get it down, it was a really interesting process, and he was great. And so he would help me with, well, why would this character do this? And he'd say, oh, it's obvious. He's doing it because X, Y, and Z. And I'd be like, oh, okay. And there we have it. And so that's...
And stories are such a powerful part of who we are. We are a narrative species, and there are remarkable stories. Our sponsors also have some stories. And so we're going to take a break, let our sponsors tell their stories, but then we're going to come back to A Night in Jail and hear some more.
And we are back with the Dr. Joe Show, talking with Heidi Swan.
About A Night in Jail. And we were just talking about the process of writing, and how you and your brother, you were saying, would just talk on the phone about this. So take us through that, because we were off air, we were talking about this. We want to tell the ATD audience. So the process.
Yeah, it took a while before we figured out what the plot of the story was. And and would it be a nonfiction book or would it be a fiction book? And we landed on fiction to make it as interesting as possible. And so once we figured out the structure of the story, then we started writing the chapters. And as I would write a chapter, I would read it to him aloud over the phone. And it was really funny because he's very funny. And so I would say, basically his words to him, and he would laugh out loud. I mean, he would laugh and laugh and laugh, because as tragic as the story is, there's a lot of very funny parts to it. And that's due to him, because he's funny. And so anyway, so that's how we would do it. And then if I was stuck somewhere, I'd say, what do you think? Why is this character doing it? He would say, oh, well, they're doing it because of X. And I'd be like, oh, all right. Sounds good to me. And we just kept doing like that. So.
What a catharsis as well, though. What an interesting experience to take all of this pain and sorrow and of your brother, the family effect, and then you create something. That is a remarkable testimony to the resilience that he has as well. Remarkable.
Yes. And sometimes I talk about that in presentations that I give, is that I like this as an example to kids, and this is what you do with drug story theater, which is you take something that's so awful in your life, and you can make a song, you can write a monologue, you can write a book, you can paint something, you can make a dance, you can do all these creative things with this pain, and then it's reframed. That pain that I was in, that my brother was in, we're proud of this, so it's changed inside our hearts, inside our minds. I mean, the memories of the pain and the sadness about what happened are definitely still there, but they're softened and they're part of a different overall story. And so I appreciate that he was willing to do that, and I appreciate that you do that. And Tom, I believe that's what you do as well.
Mark. Yeah,
And Mark too.
Time to time, Tom?
Time to time, Tom.
Time to time, Tom. Yeah. And that's part of what the Dr. Joe Show is as well, is we want to highlight people like you, Heidi, who are bringing this to the world.
Thank you.
That they're bringing this remarkable energy, and in a time where we have so much anger.
Yeah.
We're also about hope. There is a lot of hope. Even your brother was at an IM.
Yeah.
And that's the part, is that was his current maximum potential. That was who he is, what was going on, the influence of the 4 domains. But what's fascinating by the story is how, if we don't ask someone, we won't be able to really know what the influence of those domains are. And people aren't going to tell us if they fear they will be judged as less than and broken when they tell us their story. So I'm so delighted to hear that your brother found a person, a psychiatrist, who he could trust.
Yeah.
With that trust, so much was revealed.
Yes. And he said that he was just so surprised how kind she was to him, and he felt comfortable revealing this. And so imagine if he hadn't been to someone like her.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe we would never have heard it, and maybe he would have been not been given Social Security, because that's the thing here. He has Social Security disability, thank heavens. And it pays for the roof over his head. It pays for his food. And that's all he needs. That's all he wants is, and he lives with a sober roommate, and he goes to 12-step meetings, and he passes on the message to people. And he says that, in the days of a night in jail, he was always collecting, trying to get money to do a drug deal, getting drug dealers' phone numbers. And now he's collecting phone numbers from people in 12-step meetings. And that's his joy now. And it's really wonderful to see that.
Yeah, one of the phrases we have with drug-free theaters: contribute to society to help with your sobriety. Because as you give to others, you increase your own value. And that, from a brain point of view, really feels better than getting high from drugs and alcohol. But your brother has more than that. So the weed may have been the trigger to set off the psychosis. So how is he managing the psychotic process now?
I think, well, he's pretty, he's getting treated. So
Good.
That's really good. And I think I would leave that for him to speak to. But
I would
will say,
be delighted if he did.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear him tell us. But go on.
Yeah, he's
Sorry.
a lot of fun. He's a lot of fun. But what's really, I think, rare about him and valuable about him is he's able, as a sober person today, to look back and remember what he was thinking when he was in the throes of his illness, in the throes of his addiction and his delusions, what he was thinking before all that as well, what led him on this journey. And I think that is what makes the story intriguing for teens, because they can identify with a lot of what he's saying. They go, oh yeah, I know what it feels like to feel awkward around a girl and want to, have a little something to make me feel less self-conscious. And I know what it, those are the kind of stories that are told. About why, how did he get started in the first place, how ambitious he was, and how it's like a slow erosion of what the potential of a person's life. And it really happens really quite slowly, that a lot of people don't even notice it.
Yeah. And so what are you doing now with Night in Jail and trying to get the word out? How's Heidi Swan doing it? We've spoken a lot about your brother. Let's talk about Heidi.
Well, this is my passion. And as we discussed how marijuana has changed, this alarms me greatly. When we voted for Prop 64 here in California to legalize, I had no idea marijuana had changed since the 1980s. I thought we were legalizing the same marijuana that I was using, my brother was using, and I realized that it had a side effect for some people. And I thought, well, it should still be legalized because, for a variety of reasons. And so I did that. And my husband said, you're voting to legalize this while you're writing a book about the harms of it. And I said, yes, I am. And he's like, okay, all right. And then as I was just about finished with the book, and it's a lot of work, as you've written 2 books now.
No, my 5th book is coming out in February. So
well, you're prolific. That's
a lot of books.
It's a lot, and it's a lot of work. And I was just finishing with it, And I was so tired, and I really just didn't want to. I was just tired, and then I was talking to a friend of mine who works in prevention, and she said, "Well, you know, with these high potency products, these kids are really putting their brains at risk." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Oh, you know, the stuff kids are dabbing and vaping, the concentrates." And I'm like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." And so she had to describe to me these products that were 4, 5, 10 times stronger than what I thought we voted for. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And so she explained how the mental health problems are so much more acute with these strong products. And so it's not like a slow erosion of a life. It can be a fast erosion of a life. There are some people, tragically, who after just a couple years using these ultra high potency products have terrible mental health effects, including bipolar disorder and increased risk to suicide. I mean, I have friends whose children have committed suicide because their psychosis was so severe. They were positive. I mean, and it's similar things like the FBI is following me, the CIA is following me, and then a young person will do something horrible. I mean, and so this really galvanizes me because I understand what it is because it happened to me. But now I know it's much worse for young people. And I remember being young and I remember being dumb and thinking, it's not a big deal. It's okay. I'll be fine. You know, everybody else is doing it and go ahead. But for me, I couldn't afford to do that. And especially today, I imagine me in today's world taking a hit off a vape.
Right.
That's 10 times stronger than, you know, I would probably be in the emergency room, you know, with hallucinations and paranoia and other things.
Yeah. Well, you had that experience in the laundry. I'm just going to change one word, Heidi. I hope you don't mind.
Yeah.
I don't think adolescents are dumb. They're
Oh.
not dumb.
Thank you. Okay.
And the reason I say that is because part of their brain, however, is not developed.
Yeah.
And that's the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's responsible for thinking, rational thought, being able to make a plan, execute a plan, and anticipate what will happen next.
Right.
So that's the prefrontal cortex. The adolescent brain is limbic. It is emotional, irrational, impulsive. What do adolescents want? They want to feel pleasure, take risks, and be social. Man, is that a setup for addiction or what?
Yeah.
Feel pleasure, take risks, and be social. So for us here in Massachusetts, it was 2016. And we voted to make marijuana legal. I did not vote in favor of it, either in Marshfield or in our state ballot. But for me, as I look back on it, it's as if a whole group of adults just stopped using their prefrontal cortex and stopped thinking, what will happen next if we do this now? What's the message we're sending to our children when we legalize marijuana?
Mm-hmm.
And man, we got so much pushback. But that's the thing. And so I am using my prefrontal cortex and I'm anticipating next, what will happen if I don't let our sponsors tell us about their material in our last commercial break? I'm not going to do that. We are going to hear from our sponsors. Larry, let's take a commercial break. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show.
And we are back with the Dr. Joe Show, talking with Heidi Swan, author of A Night in Jail, telling us some intriguing stories about her brother's journey.
Yes.
Mark, what do you think about this? Because you've worked with me for a while with Drugs Free Theater. You too, Tom.
You know, I think it's fascinating how an industry can pull the wool over the eyes of society so easily, and we accept it. You know, the cigarette industry did it for years, and shame on them. Huge billion-dollar settlements for lying to us, and now we're sitting here watching it happen all over again, and with a much more serious effect.
With weed, and what's just happened with prescription pain medicines, right?
Right.
With the OxyContin, I mean, that whole thing. Yep, it's remarkable how susceptible we are to certain things. So what do we do now, Heidi? First, tell people how they get the book, where they can go. How do we get it?
Thank you for asking. It can be purchased at Amazon, A Night in Jail, and go to the website anightinjail.com because there's lots and lots of things to read. They're short, and if you look under menu item research, there are short articles and videos and studies, and also websites that are have similar information on them. And so you can see some of the most respected peer-reviewed articles showing the link between marijuana and a host of mental illnesses. So go there, and if you go to the products menu item, the story options, there's we have an audio book, and we have the paperback book, and there's a short film that can be licensed, and there's also a play. So let's say
Wow.
kids at school want to perform the play. We've got a script for it. Two versions. So a short one that's, runs about 18 minutes, and a long one that runs 75 minutes. And 2 years ago, we had a wonderful staged reading of A Night in Jail here in Los Angeles. And I mean, we had a full house, and there were people gasped, people laughed. And at the end, we had a standing ovation. It was wonderful, wonderful. And it's an intense story. I love it, and I'm really grateful. My brother helped me with it, and he said when we had the staged reading that night, my brother Kirk said that it was the happiest day of his life, and so that was really rewarding.
Wow. And then I don't know, Lara, do we have any of that audio book? I don't know whether I sent it to you or not. If we do, maybe we can queue up a minute or right. And there was also a video that you sent us. How do people get that video? Is that accessible?
Yeah. Let's see. Where is that? If you go to anightinjail.com, and then there are it's the improvisational page. So it's very similar to what you do with Drug Story Theater. Like we have some ideas for how to do an improv based on today's marijuana and get kids on their feet and talking and engaged. So I sent you a video of some actors doing improvisational exercises. And then after the improvisational exercises, we had, I just thought we would talk about the acting, sort of have a debriefing and like, oh, how'd you feel? What did you think? And instead of talking about the acting exercises, these kids wanted to talk about the effects of growing up in a world where this is a normal drug, where this is a healthy drug, where everybody is using it openly. And I was kind of taken aback by that. And so we just let the conversation happen. And that's also on the website. It's very interesting to do.
It's terrific. And talking about how the vapes were are basically strawberry and lemon and flavored. So you don't even think about it. I mean, that gets into the whole thing of edibles. You're talking about edibles as well, and the targeting audience of edibles.
Oh, I mean, this has got to change. This is something that the law has got to get in front of. I mean, we stopped selling those bubblegum cigarettes. Remember those? I loved those things, and it normalized cigarettes to kids. And so those are gone now. We should not be selling THC edibles in a package that looks exactly like something a kid would eat. There was a study released from Ottawa that there had like an 800% rise in pediatric visits to emergency rooms because of mostly these candies. And the ages was 0 to 9.
Wow.
So imagine what then they go to the emergency room. Some of them had to be intubated. I mean, we have really got to get a hold of this kids menu of marijuana products. If you must have an edible, make it look like a little piece of coal. And I'm quoting a friend of mine who works for an organization in Colorado called One Chance to Grow Up. And she said, there is no reason to make something look like a candy except to market it to children. But this is exactly what the industry needs, because they don't want just people with cancer smoking a little joint every now and again. No, they need users. They need people using on a regular basis, and they need them using for the rest of their lives. And so to do that, they have to addict people as soon as possible. And under the age of 18, as you know, Dr. Schran, that's when the brain is most vulnerable to addiction. And so they are after our kids. We've got to put a stop to that. I mean, I'm just shocked. And so, and if an adult then says, well, the only way that I can take it is I don't want to smoke it because it's bad for my lungs, it's bad for my heart. Yes, it is. THC is. And, but even the edibles are still, this THC, no matter how you ingest it, has consequences for the heart. And so, but just make it not attractive to kids. How about it comes in a little prescription bottle and then you have to, you know, the kids' menu needs to go.
It is remarkable. And you know, folks who've seen drugstore theater, you know, the numbers, right? If you start using drugs or alcohol after the age of 21, you start smoking weed after the age of 21, 1 out of 25 people are at risk for lifelong addiction. 1 out of 25. You start using before the age of 18, that number goes from 1 in 25 to 1 in 4. 1 in 4 kids are at risk for lifelong addiction just because the way their brains are developing. Addiction is not about morality, it's about mortality. This is just the way the brain is. And that's the other part of it is once you're using, and if you are addicted, there's such a stigma about coming to get help. You're judged. You know, what's wrong with you? You're weak. It's your fault. You were using. We have to be able to break that barrier as well. Because if you need help, come and get it. Come out of the shadows and get some help.
If I can just interject something about stigma, I think it's okay to stigmatize the substance, but not the user. Just like we did with tobacco. We have successfully flipped that script.
Yep.
And right now we're on the other side with marijuana. It's cool. It's normal. It's okay. And if you say anything about it, guess who's stigmatized? I'm stigmatized. Because I say, oh, did you know there are mental health effects? Did you know that it worsens COVID? Did you know it's a toxin and it causes cancer? Did you? And they go, what? Who are you? Shut up. And they call me names, you know, and it's like, excuse me, you don't want to know about the side effects? And I mean, and so the stigma comes to the people in prevention. And I'm not the one that said it. Our Surgeon General said it. You know, the American Academy of Sciences, the National Academy of Sciences said it, not me. I'm just telling you about my personal experience that confirms what they said. And so it's an interesting stigma thing right now. And so let's stigmatize the drug and let's have empathy for the human who fell prey.
Great. Yeah. So we're coming to the end of the show. And as we do at the end, we talk about the 2 truths of the I am. Remember, the I am is saying we're all doing the best we can, influenced by the 4 domains of your home, the social domain, the biological, and the I see. How I see myself, how I think other people see me. Because the domains interact, a small change can have a big effect. So Heidi, what small change can you recommend to our listeners regarding this topic?
Like the way we talk about preventing heart disease and preventing cancer, we should talk about that with mental illness as well. Are there things that we can do to promote a healthy brain, prevent mental illness? And there are some things. Now, will every mental illness be prevented? No, absolutely not. But let's stack the deck in our favor. And so how do we have a healthy brain? We wear helmets when we're toddlers. We put on seatbelts so we don't bang our head against the glass if we get hit. And we should protect our brains chemically as well. Let's not use a substance that can do damage that could be irreversible. And you can't go back on that. And so I want to bring awareness of that to youth, to protect their brains. And as you say, don't give it away. Don't give it to the industry. you need that brain, and it needs to form all by itself until the mid-20s. And then if you must do whatever it is, then like you said, there are less consequences.
Yeah. And I think you may have already answered the second truth. You control no one, you influence everyone. You get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Heidi Swan, what kind of influence do you want to be?
I got into this because I want to prevent more homelessness. How do we prevent homelessness? We prevent addiction. We prevent mental illness. How do we prevent mental illness and addiction? One of the things is, like you said, don't use substances before the age of 25, any of them. There is no safe drug.
Heidi, thank you so much. Folks, A Night in Jail. You can get it on Amazon, anightinjail.com. Go to the website. It's really, really good. Great read.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Heidi.
Thank you. Thanks, Larry. We'll see you next week. Tom, see you next week.
Stretch the canvas, brush it now.